Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspire Change with Gunter. If your organization cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspire Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked #1 in Australia and #5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts to listen and follow in 2024. With an average of 50,000 downloads per episode each week from listeners all around the world, our reach is significant and growing. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spigener-Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome to Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host, Gunter, and in this space I want to dive into a deep conversation about masculinity, mental health, and the journey towards becoming better men and women, but that for another time. Today, I thought I'd share my perspective on why I believe that psychotherapy, combined with the framework of making good men great, synthesizes into a powerful tool for change. And it's not just change for the individual. I think that this represents a tool for communal change. So, in this episode, I begin by exploring how psychotherapy offers powerful tools for reshaping our understanding of masculinity. And in that context, I'll be focusing on Freudien, attachment, and humanistic existential therapies, and incorporate that into making good men great framework. That helps to redefine masculinity in order for men to live fuller, more emotionally connected lives. I want to discuss why this conversation is crucial in today's context, and especially focus on the fact that men are facing a persistent, ongoing mental health crisis. And it's not just in our mental health, it's also in our relationships with each other. And that goes in the small space as well as in the big space. This particular podcast opens up an exposition fundamentally of how I work. Something that's taken about 40 years to really evolve and refine. And I continue to develop further. My sense is that psychotherapies, both philosophically and psychologically, are a work in progress. And as such, it really is up to us individual therapists to think and rethink what it is that we're working with and how it fits together. So let's get started on this. So the first part of this is, why do I find this conversation to be urgent? Well, now more than ever, I believe we need to rethink masculinity. And the fact that this need is glaringly clear. Men are facing alarming rates of mental health issues. I keep talking about this. We're talking about depression, anxiety, substance abuse, ADHD, and unfortunately, tragically, suicide rates amongst men remain disproportionately high compared to women. But this crisis isn't just about isolated statistics. It's also about the deep roots of the masculine identity in a world that's rapidly changing, leaving many men feeling lost, disconnected, alienated, and unsure of their place in the world. So here's why I believe this issue is so urgent. Traditional masculinity, with its emphasis on toughness, emotional stoicism, or in fact, emotional suppression and dominance, has often left me and other men feeling isolated from our own emotional experiences. My own personal journey started with a philosophical view when I was in my mid-teens, but then progressed into training as a psychologist and going into my own therapy, where I began to experience the processes that I was, both going to be working with, but that I also found necessary and essential for my own development. Traditional masculinity, patriarchy, has erected a barrier that prevents us men from accessing the emotional intimacy that is essential for developing healthy relationships. But also, it's essential in maintaining physical well-being because it's a package. It's taking care of the physical, the psychological, and the social. So when I began to really explore that process of vulnerability, I realized that I was taught to repress vulnerability, especially in my peer groups. And in doing so, I realized that I'd lost a vital connection to my own humanity. But the offset was my striving to understand philosophy, spirituality, and ultimately psychology. So I'm coming at this not just from an academic place, but I'm coming at it from a personal lived experience. And so this is where psychotherapy really comes into play. By integrating core psychological theories and practices, we can reimagine masculinity in a way that's not about stripping away strength, but rather embracing a fuller, more balanced expression of what it means to be a man. So let me review a bit about my framework, the Making Good Men Great framework. So at its core, Making Good Men Great is about three things. It's about reimagining masculinity. It's about developing a comprehensive process for change. And it's building supportive networks wherein we as men connect with others. So that's really very much at the heart of it. Now, what's crucial here is that Making Good Men Great framework doesn't discard the values that have traditionally been associated with masculinity, like strength or courage and responsibility, but it redefines them. Strength becomes emotional resilience. Courage becomes vulnerability. And responsibility becomes accountability, not just to others, but fundamentally to ourselves. So, how does psychotherapy then fit in as a tool for redefining masculinity? So, in this context, I'm looking to explore very briefly in this context 3 therapeutic approaches. The traditional, the grandfather of it all, which is Freudian psychoanalytic psychotherapy. The second part to this is then exploring attachment theory and also the idea of attachment therapy. And then thirdly, the humanistic existential therapies, like, for example, Gestalt therapy. Now, each of these offer a unique pathway to heal and redefine my sense of self. But, I've always been curious and, philosophically, I'm very much a believer of not either or, but and also. So in my early work where I was looking at using a specific theoretical framework and practice, I began to realize more and more that broadening this out was allowing me to engage with individual life stories better. Right? So one of the other areas that came into play was the whole notion of the narrative. Okay, so let me give you a quick, brief sort of tick about each of those areas that I'm talking about. So what's Freudian psychoanalysis fundamentally about? Well, it's about understanding the unconscious. Freud, who's often seen as the father of modern psychotherapy, emphasized the power of the unconscious mind. Those hidden desires and conflict that drive a substantial amount of our behavior. When applied to masculinity, Freudian analysis helps us to uncover the deep-seated beliefs men hold about what it means to be a man. Now, some of that has needed to be evolved. So we often talk about neo-Freudian psychoanalysis. Now, within those framework, both the traditional Freudian and psychoanalytic school, but also the neo-Freudians, one of the things that we sort of look at is the internalized messages about things like dominance, control, and emotional repression. And the latter in particular, because not only do we repress emotions, but we also taught to suppress them quite consciously. Having done so, most of us actually don't realize how these processes are shaping our lives. So in therapy, in this particular context, men can explore these unconscious dynamics, discovering how their upbringing, social expectations, and unresolved conflicts from early childhood affect the current behaviors and relationships. So the Freudian work can help us confront the roots of our emotional struggles, beginning to bring the hidden into the light. Now, here's the thing. This is, in my framework, an aspect of the work. It's not the entirety of it. And most Freudian analysts would look at this and go, well, that's really doing us a disservice. And I accept that. But I'm trying to get a sense across about how psychotherapies can evolve and synthesize with other frameworks. So let me go to the next one. Let's talk about attachment theory. And here the idea, in my view, is that what we're talking about fundamentally is healing through connection. Now, attachment theory was developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, and it focuses on our early relationships with caregivers and how they shape our capacity for intimacy and emotional regulation. So do we have a safe sense of attachment? Are we avoidant, ambivalent, anxious, dismissive? Which type of attachment style have you developed? Now, for many men growing up in environments where emotional closeness was discouraged, or in some instances even punished, it has left them with what's best described as insecure attachment styles. And that can manifest as avoidance of intimacy, a fear of vulnerability, or overwhelming dependency in relationships. Now, through therapy, men can learn to recognize these patterns and heal their attachment wounds. What's powerful about attachment theory is that it doesn't just offer intellectual insight. It offers a way to experience new kinds of emotional connections, ones that are based on trust, openness, and security. In the context of masculinity, this is transformative. It allows men to begin to build healthier, more connected relationships with others and themselves. But it needs to be fostered and it needs to be encouraged through the relationship with someone who's carefully and persistently followed their own journey through a similar process. Now, the third one is the humanistic existential psychotherapy. And that, if I put it in a nutshell, is how to embrace your authenticity. It focuses fundamentally on personal freedom, on meaning making, and that whole concept of being real. Think of this as a call to live life fully, to face the anxiety of existence with courage, and to embrace one's unique path. For men, this is often challenging and threatening because we're taught and trained to be part of a system, an ideology that actually doesn't really like a healthy, interconnected way of existing. So to go down this path of authenticity ultimately requires some challenging experiences, but it ultimately is liberating. It asks us to step outside of the narrow social confines of roles and ask, who am I? Who am I really? What do I value? And what kind of a man do I want to be? Not what I'm told to be, but what I want to be. In many ways, the existential approach aligns perfectly well with the Making Good Men Great framework, but so do the others. In this context, in the humanistic existential frame, it encourages men to reject the rigid script of patriarchal masculinity and instead to write your own story, your own narrative. Therapy becomes a space where you as a man can safely explore your existential questions about life, relationships, purpose, and meaning, and in doing so, break free from the chains of social expectations. And in doing so, we become more self-aware, more flexible, more adaptive, more resilient, and we begin to live life in an enriched space. We become more of what we've been. So that's the beginning of a snapshot of what I want to take you through in the next few podcasts. I'm going to extend this because I want to be able to create a sense of why what I do is so valuable to me and why other men have experienced this as a valuable pathway to change. I don't think one particular framework serves all, but I do think that once we understand the interconnection of the different frameworks, because they are interconnected, where does that then take me? Once I start working with that, so firstly, where does that take me as a therapist? And secondly, where does that allow me to take my clients? Because it is very clear the social scripts to which we are trying to adhere to are toxic. They're not helping us. They're not useful. They stopped being useful many, many years ago. They might be useful if you want to be, completely, totally materialistic and, walk all over everybody and not have any close, intimate relationships and essentially being seen by everybody else as an asshole. And there's lots of, good examples of this in the current geopolitical scene at the moment. But we cannot, as a humanity, afford to continue on that pathway. We need to develop the courage to pick up and change and help each other to change and live better. So let's round this together. So as we discussed today, the intersection of psychotherapy and masculinity through the framework of Making Good Men Great, offers a powerful way forward. By integrating Freudian, psychoanalytic, attachment, and humanistic existential approaches, we've got tools not just to understand ourselves, but to transform, to go from the intellectual to the experiential. And so that's about how I live, and that's how we live and relate to each other. My view, and perhaps somewhat narcissistically so, is that the Making Good Men Great framework gives us the map showing how we can redefine strength, vulnerability, and connection in ways that truly enrich our lives. But this journey requires action. It's time really to start seriously, deeply questioning the narratives that we've been handed about what it means to be a man. It's time to start building new stories, ones that include emotional depth, compassion, and genuine human connection. And each of the psychotherapies that I've talked about, and there's many more actually that have come to be, but I wanted to focus on the more traditional ones because that's a good starting point, is that they give us a roadmap that sits within the context of the Making Good Men Great framework. The task of becoming expressive rather than suppressing emotion or repressing it, the capacity to develop self-awareness, the capacity to understand my relationships with others and the importance of that. Each of those psychotherapies builds together the exploration of my past and how it influences the now. How to live more fully in the now. How do I understand myself within the now more readily? So here's my challenge to you. I want you to reflect on the men in your life, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter at this point. How might they benefit from a reimagined, evolved masculinity? How could you, as a man or as someone who loves men, start embodying these changes? Now, as always, this begins with a dialogue, with a conversation. It starts with one conversation. It starts with one act of vulnerability and then one commitment to change. So let me thank you for joining me today on Inspire Change with Gunter. I firmly believe that together we can rewrite the future of masculinity. So until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and stay open to change. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Follow me on social media for more insights into redefining masculinity and living authentically. And let's keep the fires of change burning. And let's talk about it. Until next time, this is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.